Why do we eat so much refined grains, and what is the harm in consumption of these refined grains? Let's take a closer look at the mechanism. We'll start first with the question why we eat refined grains. Recall, the average American consumes 9 servings of refined grains every day. There are several factors that are at play here. The first is production. Recall that refined grains have the bran and the germ removed. Part of the bran and the germ are healthy fats. Healthy fats in whole grains can go rancid. They can spoil. That means that refined grains without the healthy fats in them are going to have a greater shelf life. This means that a loaf of Wonder Bread can last years on the shelf, whereas a whole grain product might need to be refrigerated and will go bad sooner. So having shelf-stable foods is going to be advantageous for the food industry. It's going to be advantageous for consumers because they can buy foods less often and at lower cost. Second factor at play here for why we eat so many refined grains has to do with dietary guidelines in the 1980s. The dietary guidelines in the 1980s, starting in 1980 with the food pyramid, recommended that Americans reduce their intake of fat. And in any diet where you reduce intake of fat, some other macronutrient is going to take its place, and most usually that's carbohydrates. And that was the case in the early 1980s as a result of the USDA guidelines. You can see by this food pyramid published in 1980 that fats make up only the top of the pyramid, are supposed to be eaten only at a small amount, and grains make up the largest contribution of food in our diet. This doesn't specifically direct people to eat refined grains, but it does encourage the consumption of grains in general, and the food industry was already preferring to produce refined grains, and so this basically translated into increased consumption of refined grains. Another reason why we eat so many refined grains is because refined grains are actually addictive. Refined grains are processed to the point where they don't have their bran and their germ in them. When they touch our tongue, they actually cause a release of sugar catalyzed by the enzyme salivary amylase. That sugar signal goes right up to our brain and causes us a reward signal, the same pathway used for cocaine, sex, and tobacco. So anything that turns into sugar on our tongue, refined grains included, will cause immediate hit of dopamine or pleasure in our brains and create a craving for more. So we tend to overeat refined grains for that reason. This schematic shows what I just described. When you eat sugar, but we're here talking about the simple carbohydrate of refined grains turned into sugar on the tongue by salivary amylase, it tastes good. You like it. This causes a release of dopamine in the brain. Once the sugar is digested, you crave more, and thus the cycle is repeated. And a twin phenomenon with the rise in blood sugar and the addictiveness of sugar in the diet and how that results in excess food consumption is the effect of that rise in blood sugar on insulin. When we eat refined grains, when they turn into sugar on our tongue and throughout our digestive tract, it causes the pancreas to signal the need for insulin. Insulin is released by the pancreas. What insulin does is it causes the sugar in our bloodstream to be stored as fat. What this means is that our blood sugar levels drop, our body senses this and gives us a hunger signal to eat more. This graph shows the effect of refined grains or foods that are otherwise high in glycemic index, meaning high in carbohydrates that raise blood sugar. Our blood sugars spike after refined grains, and then insulin is released and they rapidly fall to the point of a level below our normal blood glucose. The insulin response is so robust it overcompensates, all of the glucose is converted into fat in the cells, and we sense a low blood sugar, and that causes hunger. We have here 4 factors contributing to the overconsumption of refined grains. The fact that they're shelf-stable, the fact that they don't include fat and replace much of the fat in the diet based on dietary guidelines starting in the 1980s, the fact that they turn into sugar on our tongue and hit our reward pathway and give us cravings to eat more, and finally the fact that they raise our insulin levels, which causes our blood sugar level to fall to a point that makes us hungry and need to eat or want to eat more.